In this video, we're going to take a look at some different sculptural types. Remember that in regards to sculpture, this is a way in terms of portraiture that the patrician class can celebrate their status. And then we're also going to take a look at some funerary practices and their relationship with sculpture. One of the things we'll see right away is that in funerary practices, we're going to see more burials instead of cremation and in the Roman Empire. So the sarcophagus is something that became an expression of status after the time of Hadrian, and it was most common after the High Empire. Again, after Hadrian's time, they were preferring burial over cremation, and this is something that might reflect influences from Christianity and other religions that were believing in the afterlife. So you would still have emperors cremated, but more common people were opting for burial. So you have a need for a sarcophagus. And here you're looking at an example of a typical sarcophagus for the upper class. And on this example, you're seeing Bacchus and the four seasons. So Bacchus is in the center. The four seasons are the four figures that you see, two on either side of him. And tucked on the one edge, you're seeing Mother Earth and what is probably a river god on this side of the sarcophagus. So Greek mythology was a popular subject, and they liked the sarcophagus because it's something that could be viewed from all sides, and many times it would stand right in the center of a burial chamber, different from what we would have seen with the Etruscans, with an object set against the wall and really seen from the front. So this one is from the 3rd century, commissioned by a wealthy aristocratic family, and there are elements that show you contrapposto. When you look at the four seasons in particular, again, Bacchus is in the center. He's seated on a panther. And there's about 40 different figures and animals that wrap around the three sides of this sarcophagus. The use of Greek iconography shows that this is probably something that the sculptor used based on a pattern book. So this is something that was fairly popular as far as the subject matter. This is the Prometheus sarcophagus, and it's another example showing you from the 3rd century the use of Greek mythology. And in the center, Prometheus is here, and he is actually making humans from clay. And this is Minerva right next to him. She is giving each soul in the form of a butterfly. So you see butterflies flitting around her, and you can see how this figure is just being made, and then this figure starts to have a little bit of animation to it. This sarcophagus is actually a sarcophagus for a child, and on the lid it is a sleeping boy, and he has with him his pet, and he also has a toy here in his hands. So great amount of detail. You can see the high relief that some of these sarcophagi were carved with. And then there's a few other details in there that tell the narrative of the cycle of making life with Prometheus and many of the other humans that they've already created that move around the composition. This is, by comparison, a little tablet that might be placed on a tomb that would be used for a much more ordinary, a common person. So if you weren't of the upper class, many people of just average society were buried in communal tombs. So in a city like Ostia, Rome's harbor city, you would see tombs that were brick-faced concrete, and you might have multiple members of the family buried in the tomb together, and these tombs looked similar to the apartment blocks that average citizens would have lived in. And this terracotta tile would have been a form of decoration on one of the tombs. And you're looking at someone who is a vegetable seller. So she is there behind the counter showing all of her vegetables, and we're having this play in perspective where the top of the table is actually turned towards us. But lots of details to show you an appreciation for what would be like in everyday life for someone of the average plebeian class. And then one other aspect just to round out ideas about burial practices. Remember that in the 1st and 2nd century, by this time, Egypt is a part of the Roman Empire. And this is an example of a mummy portrait. So in carrying on some of the traditions that would have been part of Egyptian burial practices, here you have portraits that were painted on wooden panels, and this is something that replaced the traditional portrait masks. So this is actually a priest of the Egyptian god Serapis, but he's very much presented in Roman fashion in terms of the facial features, the beard, the hairstyle, and many times these sorts of portraits were probably painted while the subject was still alive, so it was very faithful to the qualities of that person and could go along with their burial after they had passed. Typically this was done in encaustic, which is pigment mixed with hot wax, so it preserves the image very, very well. And there are hundreds of these Fayum portraits preserved in specifically the Fayum district in Egypt. We'll take a look next at portrait busts.